I'm happy.
They had to endure Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump before they got Joyce Vance, Frank Figluzzi, and all the great folks here. So,
well, it's good to be all those Figluzzi, everybody, all that. That's all good. That's all good. I'm just happy to be back, too, and hear you.
We missed you.
I missed you. I missed everybody, so it's good to be back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. If it's Wednesday, it's a summer grilling on the Hill. Good evening, I'm Chuck Todd here in Washington. Welcome to MTP Daily. You are looking live at Capitol Hill, where the current Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is being grilled from both sides of the aisle, basically, by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He is testifying for the first time since last week's, I don't know what you call it, but that summit, don't call it a summit, call it a meeting, but it was a PR disaster between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. The incredible fallout from that meeting, summit, whatever, continues to escalate to the point where we're starting tonight's show with a question facing Republicans that shows you just how far the party has moved under President Trump. And that question is, would Republicans rather win with Putin's help or lose without it? It's a provocative question, we know. But so far in this hearing, Pompeo has been defiant, and he claims this president has a clear-eyed view of the Russian threat.
I want you to know President Trump has stated that he accepts our intelligence community's conclusion that Russia meddled in the 2016 election. He has a complete and proper understanding of what happened. I know. I briefed him on it for over a year.
Well, if the president has a complete and proper understanding of what happened in 2016, why has he gone to such great lengths to publicly downplay and at times dispute what happened in 2016? And why does he keep trying to undermine the investigation into what happened in the 2016 election? Also, as Democrats in this hearing are pointing out, Pompeo doesn't know for sure what happened in that private Trump-Putin meeting last week, because no one does except two people, Trump, Putin, and possibly the two translators. Folks, it's hard for some to take Pompeo's assurances that the president is fully comprehending the Russian threat at face value. Just consider what the president claimed yesterday, that Putin is, quote, pushing very hard for Democrats to win back Congress. Well, there's zero evidence to back that up, and we haven't heard Pompeo give us any. But there is evidence that President Trump is perhaps laying the groundwork to help himself politically by potentially claiming, one, that the midterms are somehow rigged if Democrats win back the House, and two, that he's being framed by the Russia investigation. And then there's Russia. Do you think they see that tweet about interfering with our democracy as a warning from President Trump or an invitation? Based on Mueller's court filings, we know that the Russians were actually eager to help when then-candidate Donald Trump publicly asked them to help find Hillary Clinton's emails. You may laugh at that, but that was in that indictment. And the questions surrounding the Trump-Putin relationship have only intensified after last week's bizarre summit, where Mr. Trump sided publicly with Putin over his own Department of Justice. Now, the president's team, including Pompeo, have warned Russia against attacking our democracy again. It's a lot of people surrounding the president have been doing this, just not the president. But some of the arguments we've heard from the president and his legal team suggest they might be trying to condition some of their supporters to believe that, one, maybe what Russia did was no big deal, and two, that things would be so much worse under the Democrats. So maybe we should thank the Russians. Which brings us back to this question for Republicans. Would they rather win with Putin's help or lose without it? Let's bring in tonight's panel. Shane Harris, national security reporter at The Washington Post. Danielle Pletka, senior vice president at the American Enterprise Institute, and of course an MSNBC contributor. And Cornell Belcher, Democratic pollster and an MSNBC political analyst. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for being my first panel back. Shane, let me start with you. We're hearing Pompeo. This is one of those interesting committee hearings because you're actually you're not getting tough questions from one side, patty cake questions from the other. You're getting some interesting, tough questions from both sides of the aisle.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the thrust of those questions is what happened in that room with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump at that meeting. And I don't think Mike Pompeo can really say that he fully knows. Diane Coates, the director of national intelligence, remember last week, told an audience in Aspen he didn't know. So I'm not exactly sure why Mike Pompeo would know and why President Trump would be a completely reliable narrator in this. But that is deeply frustrating for a committee that is supposed to be exercising oversight of U.S.-Russia policy and that is already suspicious of this relationship.
Danny, let me play for you an exchange between Senator Menendez and Secretary Pompeo.
Senator, I understand the game that you're playing.
No,
I get
no,
it.
you know, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect,
Yeah,
I don't appreciate you characterizing my questions. My questions is to get to the truth. We don't know what the truth is. And the only way that we will know what the truth is, what transpired in those 2 hours, in a highly amazing period of time to spend alone, one-on-one, is by understanding at least that if you were briefed by the president, what he told you. I don't think that's unfair to know, to understand what policy is.
How's Mr. Pompeo doing?
Well, I think he's doing the best in a very difficult situation. Look, it's the height of unprofessionalism for any president of the United States, no matter what his party is, not to have his staff in the room, not to sit there and correct him or kibitz or report on him, but to help him understand what was said afterwards. What did Putin really mean when he said that? What do you think he was implying when he asked that?
Just look at the North Korean, the fact that what they say the word denuclearization means and what we do. I mean, you know, they think we're going to get rid of all of our nukes.
But
by the way, all of them, yes, globally. Okay.
And maybe Donald Trump agreed to that. But I'll say this. There's an upside that people don't talk about enough to this, which is when the staff isn't in the room and the president doesn't actually know what was said, they don't do anything. They are not taking... I'm completely serious. I was a staffer for a long time, and people would run into my boss, and they would say to me, I just saw the senator, and he told me X. And I'd say, that's wonderful. I'd like to hear that from him, and I never did.
Or he might say X. He knew it was Y, but he was having to tell Senator that it was X.
Exactly. By
the way, just to show you that this isn't just Menendez, a Democrat, going after Pompeo, a Republican appointee. Here's Bob Corker, who we know had his own run-ins with this administration, but the chair of the Foreign Relations Committee.
You come before a group of senators today who are filled with serious doubts about this White House and its conduct of American foreign policy. The administration tells us, don't worry, be patient, there's a strategy here, but from where we sit, it appears that in a ready, fire, aim fashion, the White House is waking up every morning and making it up as they go.
Cornell, I actually, when I read Corker's statement, and then went to opening statement, they released that early, right? And then I looked, I was like, is this Menendez's or Corker's statement?
Right.
I was like, wow.
Corker's is free now because he's apparently not running anymore, so he's free to act like you expect the senator to act.
We have a new game show coming up about Republicans running or retiring based on sound.
Based on how they act, because look, our country was attacked, and Russia is a serious threat, and Americans are growing in their concern about Russia, particularly after this summit. So it's good to see Senator Corker acting out, you know, putting a check on this. I wish that more Republican senators would, because that's the only way to actually fix this problem.
What do we make, though, of Pompeo's defensiveness here? Is this a performance just to reassure President Trump? He doesn't seem, it's weird. He came in with a few prepared things. We'll never recognize Crimea. Okay. And he wrote down, and by the way, you know, we have no uncertain terms, I've briefed the president. But he doesn't want to placate the skepticism either.
Right. He can't look like he's, frankly, like Kirstjen Nielsen has looked in some of her recent performances, where she is really...
She looks almost apologetic for defending the policy.
And she looks like she's denying reality. Now, Mike Pompeo wants to be clear-eyed about Russia, but he also, I think, better than any other cabinet secretary, has managed that relationship with the president by not contradicting him, not embarrassing him, not making him look out of the loop, really kind of being there to back him up and then say, essentially to present himself, I think, as the rational, sensible one who's in control, and say, now let's really talk about the policy and not the optics of the president. He's navigated that really skillfully, better than any of the others.
I want to pick up on something the president tweeted yesterday and also show you an old tweet from July. I believe it was a tweet of an old tweet that he made, and this is McKay Coppins, and this is what he tweeted. Trump and company just pivoted to, aren't you glad Russia helped us defeat Hillary Clinton? Would there be any serious blowback from his base? Are we being too cynical? Is he being too cynical?
No, there's no blowback from his base. And you know why? Because the base of the party is now Donald Trump. I mean, the remnants of Reagan are gone. This is Donald Trump's party. And look at the internals in the polling, right? You have less than 20% of Republicans now who think Russia's the enemy. Can you imagine that 10 years ago, where Republicans and Reagan and were fighting against the Russians? Now you have more Republicans who don't think that Russia is the enemy. You actually have more Democrats think Russia's the enemy than the Republicans.
Danny, you're always the one that tries to keep the snark and the cynicism to a minimum. Are we being too snarky and cynical on this?
Well, the president certainly set himself up. Look, I remember when Barack Obama told Mitt Romney that the 1980s called when Romney suggested that Russia was a genuine threat.
No.
And I mean, this really has been an awakening for the Democrats that they now perceive Russia as a genuine threat.
By the way, will they still believe that if Trump leaves office? Right? I mean, we'll find out.
When they help us win back the House, we'll be good.
We're waiting for China to help the Democrats because Russia is going to help the Republicans.
Is that how it's going to work now? Great. Yes, the Democrats are owned by the Chinese, the Republicans by the Russians. What about us Americans?
Well, we should be helping ourselves just a tad better.
How did we get to a place, Danny, where in less than 2 years, the Republican Party is now defending a bailout, supporting tariffs, okay with whatever this extramarital thing is? And look, the Michael Cohen tape is more interesting because of what Michael Cohen, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But all of these things, he did it in less than 2 years. In less than 2 years, he flipped the Republican base.
I think he's freaked out the Republican Party in ways that we have not seen the party freak out in many, many decades. And you guys are much better on the politics of this than I am. But what I see just from talking to
You're a policy conservative.
Yeah.
Like what has happened to you?
I think
you must be shell-shocked.
Well, when I talk to Republican politicos, they just seem lost. They seem untethered from what the base is. They don't know what the base is. They don't know how to talk to them. And this is why, as we've said only 1,000 times on the show, this is why Republicans in Congress are so supine. Because they don't want to do the wrong thing, because they don't want to get voted out, and they know there's a base out there for Trump, but they just don't know who else is out there.
Look what happened to this Georgia governor, right? The guy who gets caught on tape for basically accidentally telling the truth. Well, apparently the Republican base is going to vote for the guy with the biggest truck, the biggest gun, and the biggest Trump supporter. That's exactly what happened. The guy with the bigger truck and the bigger gun won.
Well, and they feel that guy was set up, right, by the liberal media, by the elites.
By the way, the other guy was set up by a conservative media elite of some sort.
But I mean, to the point about where they're being too cynical, will Republicans react to the fact that Russia helped Donald Trump get elected? Many Republicans do not believe that. I mean, he has been very successful in the rhetoric of painting.
Well, this is where I'm confused by his gaslighting. If he doesn't believe the Russians meddled, then how are they going to meddle and help the Democrats?
Well, you're trying to make...
Am I trying to create logic?
Yeah, you're trying to be too logical. Here, I think there's a fundamental problem, and we're going to have to struggle with this, right? And my guy, Howard Dean, said this a while back, sort of criticizing Democrats. You know, they're not necessarily voting against their self-interest, they're voting for their higher interest. And when you look at what Donald Trump represents, sort of the big, strong man against all the sort of the unknown.
Own the libs.
Right, against the unknown, the tribalism, you know, a lot of sort of those other things are falling away, and they're voting for what is in fact their high interest, and a lot of that's built around fear.
Well, and it got lost, but Nikki Haley trying to lecture people about, you know, just owning the libs is not a strategy. Good for her.
And then Sessions.
Good, you know, and then Sessions, all at the same place. I know.
On the same day.
All in the same day. All right, guys, I got to pause it here. Stick around. I have a tremendous thing about rigging on the election that we will have it for later in the show, I promise. But up ahead, the latest on Secretary Pompeo's grilling on the Hill, and still going on right now. And what are the implications for Americans' intelligence community? A great question from Tim Kaine to Mike Pompeo about this. We're going to talk about it with former Defense Secretary and CIA Director Leon Panetta.